All right, so I'm going to talk about should you lease your car or should you buy your next car? And the most popular, and you guys probably already done this. You guys probably purchased your car when you went out to the dealership, but dealerships will give you the option to either buy your car or lease a car. And a lot of people don't really understand what goes into a lease. They just opt to purchase the car because that's the way they know how. And the question arises sometimes between should I lease or should I buy? And you got to look at the pros and the cons. It's not for everybody, leasing I mean, and buying is not for everybody. So you just got to weigh it out, kind of weigh out the pros and cons. So I've done that here on the whiteboard. It's just I'm going to go over what the pros and the cons are for each scenario. So if you want to lease your next car, I'll talk about the cons and the pros. If you want to buy your next car, I'll talk about the cons and the pros on those. So some of these you're going to be familiar with, but I'm going to kind of do a summary on everything. If there's additional information that I'm missing, I apologize in advance, but you guys are more than welcome to comment and kind of snowball off my my pros and cons here. So should I lease? So how a lease works is basically dealerships allow you to take not ownership of a vehicle, but to register a vehicle under your name. You're not going to own the vehicle. You're more like paying the depreciation of that vehicle. So what they're doing is they'll give you an amount of time, amount of years to have this vehicle, and they're going to calculate. It's a predetermined calculation of how much the depreciation would be. So how much will the car depreciate, and your monthly payment is going to be based off that amount. So let's talk about the cons first. So the cons about leasing a vehicle is that you'll never own the car. So like I mentioned, you're basically going to be paying the dealership a monthly payment, or whoever helped with the financing. Usually it's the dealership that helps with the financing or gives you financing, but you're only paying a monthly payment for the depreciation. You're never going to own the car at the end of it all. So it's going to be it's an open-ended agreement, but they take ownership after that agreement has expired. So unlike when you buy a car, you still keep it after you've paid it off. With a lease, you never own the car. You have to return the car at the end of your lease agreement. Okay. Then let's talk about a pro. So you get lower monthly payments than if you were to buy a vehicle. So the reason why you get lower monthly payments is because, like I mentioned, it's not based off the full price of the car. It's only based off the depreciation value, or the predetermined depreciation value, and that's up to the dealership to determine. So that's why your payments are lower per month. So if you don't have much cash flow, meaning that you don't have much discretionary income at the end of the month, maybe you're living paycheck to paycheck, then you might want to look into leasing a vehicle. If you're okay with not owning your car at the end, and you're okay with just paying low monthly payments, then you might want to look into leasing. Not saying it's the right thing to do, but you might want to look into that at least. And then another con for leasing is mileage restrictions. So this is a big one. This is a big killer. I know for me anyway, that it's a big killer for me to lease, because I don't want to be restricted as to how many miles I can drive a year. So there's mileage restrictions. If you go over an allotment of miles per year, you have to pay the dealership fees because of that. So I don't like to be restricted. I like to drive and not worry about, where, like, how many miles I've been driving, and if I'm under the limit that the dealership placed on my lease agreement. That's a big one. Mileage restrictions is a big con. In most cases, it could be a real killer when someone's deciding to lease, and they come to find out that there's mileage restrictions. That's a big one here, but just so you know, there are mileage restrictions. Every lease that you do, every lease agreement that you go into, there is a mileage restriction. So pay attention to that, and if you're gonna lease, pay attention to what those restrictions are. But if you don't drive much, I don't consider myself a big driver, but this one I just don't like the idea of it. Then let's talk about a pro here. So minimum to no basic maintenance cost. So a lot of times when you're leasing the vehicle, it's usually for the time span that you have a warranty on the vehicle. So a lot of warranties on the vehicles last 3 years, 5 years, sometimes more, depending on the vehicle. But what's great about leasing is that since you don't own the car, the dealership, or I guess good leasing agreements, good dealerships will offer a good leasing agreement where you don't have to pay no maintenance costs for the vehicle for the first, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that you're leasing the vehicle. So minimum to no basic maintenance cost is a pro when you're leasing a vehicle. So that's good. I know that when you buy, you can still benefit from minimum to no maintenance costs when you buy a car, but after that, then that's when it starts to wear and tear, and big problems can occur, and your warranty's out of date, and that can be potentially big cost to you. So minimum to no maintenance costs when you have a lease agreement. Potential fees. So let's say you buy a car, or sorry, you lease a car, and within a year you're like, man, I really don't like this car, and you're returning it back. You want to return it before your lease agreement's up. You could do that. However, there's going to be potential fees involved with that, and you got to just ask that dealership what the fees are going to be. But yeah, potential fees, just like with the mileage restrictions, there are fees if you go over, and there's more fees because if you were to decide that this car is not going to work for you in a year or two, you don't own the car, you're under an agreement with the dealership. So if you come to them before that lease agreement is up and you're not within your agreement, then there could be some potential fees, potential costs. Okay? The last pro on the lease is you get a new vehicle turnaround. Like every time your lease is up, you're going to go into a new vehicle. So leases are only good for new vehicles. So you'll never get a used car on a lease. I don't think they really provide that service yet. I don't think they should either. But when your lease is up, you know that you're going to get a brand new vehicle when your lease is up, because, well, if you decide to lease another vehicle, that is, your new vehicle turnaround will be 3 years, 2 years, however long the lease is. So you know that after that lease is up, you're going to get a new vehicle versus sticking with your old vehicle when you buy a car. Okay, so that kind of goes over the pros and cons of leasing. Like I said, if I'm missing anything, let me know. But I'm going to talk about why should I buy instead of leasing. And I like I said, I think a lot of you guys know already, like, the pros and the cons, as opposed to the lease, maybe not so much. But the cons in buying a car is that you have higher monthly payments. So like the pros over here in the lease, you have lower monthly payments. When you buy a car, it's the monthly payments are determined because of the monthly payments are determined by the amount you buy the vehicle. So if the vehicle is $30,000, you have to divide that by how many months you're going to be financing it for, plus the interest. So higher monthly payments because it's a bigger amount, whereas you're just financing the depreciation value for the lease. And then the pros in buying a vehicle is that you have total car ownership. So if something happens, say something happened to your vehicle, like let's say you dinged the vehicle, or someone dinged you, or you scratched it, or you, just damaged something on the vehicle, you don't have to pay the dealership any fees for that. And I forgot to mention that too, underneath the potential fees. That's why I left it so vague, because if you were to return your vehicle at the end of the lease agreement when you're leasing, and come to find out there's a lot of dings on the car, they're going to deduct those fees because you're only paying for depreciation. You're not paying for any scratches or imperfections. So that's another thing. But yeah, vehicle ownership, when you own your vehicle, you don't have to worry about someone taxing you on dinging the car. You're paying for this car. This is your car, 100% ownership. You know, so at the end of it all, after you're done paying it, you can pay it off in full, and then still have it, and then the cost of owning a vehicle goes down because you're not paying a monthly payment anymore plus interest. You're just paying to maintain the car and for gas now and for insurance. That's basically what you're doing. So another con for buying a car is potential long-term contracts. So if you have a job and let's say you're jumping from job to job, like maybe every 3 years or whatever, and let's say your contract for financing a vehicle is 6 years. I think the standard is 5 years, but let's say 6 years, sometimes even 7 years. They go up to 84 months. You know, you don't know if you can lose your job, and you're basically stuck. When you lose your job, you're stuck paying the payments regardless because you've signed that contract. If it's a long-term contract for 6, 7 years, no matter what, you're responsible for paying that car because you signed a contract. If you can't, then repossession will probably take place, or you can give up the vehicle, but that's going to harm your credit. I don't think that's the case with the leasing because you never owned the car. Returning the lease, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think they just charge you the fees. I don't think they put it on your credit like as if you were getting your vehicle repossessed. I might be wrong on that, which is a big thing, but for now I'm going to stick to that one. And then the last pro on here is unlimited mileage. So obviously if you own your vehicle, you're going to have unlimited mileage. That's what I love about owning a vehicle, is that I don't need to worry about any restrictions. So yeah, you can drive as much as you want, whatever you want. You can ding your vehicle. Nobody's going to sit there and tax you on any dings, and nobody's going to sit there and tax you on mileage that you're utilizing, to take a family trip or whatever. So those are the pros and cons of a lease and a purchase. So I hope that gives you guys some insight in deciding what's going to be best for you.